But there are people within it that are just like any other group. We have those issues to deal with. But I think at least I notice, because I have a Latino wife. I mean, so I deal with these issues all the time as well. But what I've noticed is not out and out covert or overt racism, or sexism, but is the culturally systemic racism and sexism that tends to bleed into any group dynamic. I was wondering if you guys could address that and how that affects you.
I just wanted a quick psychology note. What you're talking about, Eduardo, is it's called stereotype threat.
Right.
And it's when we all feel it, but I also wanted to say that it's harmful. So if an African American child takes a test and he or she feels like they're the only black person, they're representing black people and all of it, they actually do worse on the test because there's a cognitive load, because part of their brain is still thinking, oh, I really don't want to prove them right, so I'm going to really have to work extra hard, but that part of their brain isn't thinking about the test.
No, I wasn't trying to make it a positive thing. I was just describing it as a phenomenon.
And I was just talking about psychology.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I'd like to say in response to Blair's question is that comes along with us being human beings, and that just because we have bonded under the disbelief in God, it doesn't take away any other. It doesn't take away any other bad. Yes, it doesn't take away any other ignorance, any other bad habits. It doesn't take away. It should, but unfortunately, not believing in God or getting rid of the belief in God is the first step. It is the first step. There has to be a conscious effort for people to really evaluate themselves or reevaluate themselves and the way they think and start to heal from it. And everyone is at different places at different times. No one is going to get it all at once. And there has to be a sense of helping each other through it, as opposed to just expecting everyone to get it at once. It is unrealistic. And we have to remember at the end of the day that we are human beings. And it is okay to respond to our emotions. It's okay. Everything, like I heard Mr. Deity say, which was so good, basically you need hardcore evidence to disprove a belief in God. But when it comes to other theories, other notions, especially when it comes to relationships and dealing with other people, it is okay to use experiences. It is okay to speak from your point of view, because there are things that we see and that we may be able to help each other with that may not have hardcore evidence. But we know that we have put certain things into practice that can help others. And it is okay. It doesn't have to be one form, because if that's the case, then we become just as bad as the religious point of view.
I read a great Gloria Steinem quote yesterday that said that feminism isn't so much about learning, it's about unlearning. And it's about unlearning our prejudices and our assumptions about people and about the world. And I think that probably is apropos to any sort of experience, not just feminism, but whether it's racial diversity or queer diversity or cultural, or any of that, all of our different experiences.
Well, I was just going to say, I might just disagree with you just a little bit. I think that skepticism is actually the first step, or at least it was for me, and it led me down the road to becoming an atheist. And then once I got the "there's no God" part of it, out of my system, I was able to reevaluate the way that I thought about different groups and realize that the justifications that I had for not liking them or for not treating them equally was taken away because of the combination of my skepticism and the subsequent humanism that came from that.
Well, of course, we would expect that asking questions would lead to that. So we are actually in agreement with that overall.
I agree.
Do we want to ask if anyone has questions? I think that's. Did you guys have anything else?
Yeah, I also wanted to say that to all of you lovely white middle-class males out there that feel a little bit of, apprehension about how to address the issue of diversity, that we don't make it easy for you.
Yeah, that's very true.
Honestly, it's, you see the black person come in the room and either they swarm and that makes the black person or the person of any particular minority status uncomfortable, or you kind of don't talk to them and then they feel like, oh, well, they didn't really welcome me enough. I didn't really feel like they made this special effort. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I think that the way that we get around this is to address every individual as an individual and not just as a minority. So I wanted to give you all credit for the effort either way.
It's funny you mention that, because the advice that I give to my white friends is think of like the waitress or the waiter at the restaurant. There's the one that doesn't come and check on you enough. Then you don't feel like tipping. And then there's the one that bothers you every freaking minute and drives you crazy because they're too over nice. Somewhere in between there is the right place to be.
Right.
That's going to get you the biggest tip as a waiter or waitress. And because my sister is a waiter, waitress, my wife is a waitress, so that analogy works for me. But it's but that's what I strive to do, because I get your point. Because we've talked about it before. I talked about it with Debbie Goddard, which brings me to my next question, because Debbie Goddard brought it up, and I thought it was interesting because black non-believers. There's no white non-believers. Now, granted, we don't need a white non-believers. Look at the audience, right? Okay. But why do we need a black non-believers? Or what I've recently seen a trend in is exclusively women's atheist group. There's one in Chicago, there's one in California, there's one, okay, and also now Latino groups are forming as well in California, Arizona. And what I saw 2 weeks ago was a female Latino atheist group. You're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. So I think this is a neat phenomenon. I was wondering if you guys could address the issue of, one, why is a very specific group like that needed? And the question I get a lot, because you say we address this on a podcast, because a lot of people had this question, was, doesn't it actually create more racism? You and I obviously say no, that it doesn't, that it's needed, but explain to the audience.
It's a reasonable question, I think. I mean,
It is, and it deserves a reasonable answer. As far as, I cannot speak for every other group who has created a separate organization, because they may have had their own reasons for it. But I can say that for the purpose for creating Black Non-Believers, first as Black Non-Believers of Atlanta, was to specifically focus on, although not exclusive to, supporting other blacks in the community to come out as non-believers, atheists, agnostics, etc. Because Ben Birchall and I've had people tell me that they thought they were the only ones who did not believe, and this is in the black community. We're an anomaly, and it's almost like a safe haven, because it can be very detrimental, it can be very costly, both emotionally, financially, and not even both, in a lot of ways. It can be very, very costly to be out as a non-believer in the black community, which is sad. It's really, really sad. But unfortunately, it's real. There's no other way to say it. So our purpose was, and this is probably true for some other groups, minority groups rather, there's a need for it not to separate us, but to help us within the specific dynamics within our communities that we have to address and deal with, rather than some others. Because there are just some things that, and I'm very grateful for a lot of the white people who acknowledge this. There are some things that you just won't get, and there's just no way around it. There are some things that are unfortunately unique to every individual minority group, even though a lot of circumstances are similar. But there are some things that, we just have to address. Like Eduardo alluded to, and he probably said it outright, that it's natural for people to want to gravitate towards others that look like them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, our purpose was to help bring out other black non-believers. And it's more like an internal house cleaning than anything else. And just for the record, we are not, and I really don't want to answer this question again. We are not Black Atheists of Atlanta. We very much support LGBT rights, LGBT causes. We are very much for working with other groups of any color or any denomination, or especially in the free thought community, because it's really very important as to, regardless of what we call ourselves, or regardless of whatever organization that we belong to, that we work together. So we are all about unity. We are all about that collaboration.
Yeah, you said it can be hard to be atheist in the Black community. It's probably a lot easier if you're Black, atheist, and gay, right?
Oh, of course not. Of course not. Oh, maybe.
Yeah, super easy.
Right.
There are tons of us.
Yeah.
No, I guess this kind of speaks to, I will address the queer issue. Religious gays are probably my biggest pet peeve in the whole world. I mean, it really, really gets to me. I don't understand why they insist on being a part of the church instead of, you know, finding their own fellowship and finding their own groups to join. But then I think about it, and I realize, especially if they're African American or another minority, there's this concept, and I talk about it every time I'm on a diversity panel. It's intersectionality. It's this idea that when you compound minority groups, you actually create a bigger problem. It's the sum is greater than, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of deal. So I understand why they wouldn't want to trade in their majority status in that one place if they have to address their minority status everywhere else. So it's still a huge thorn in my side, but my empathetic, rational brain understands why they cling to this, even though it makes no sense. So I really want to, you know, I would love to see more, you know, gay-theist groups emerge from the community. I think that would be great.
Q&A?
Yeah, there's a Q&A group, a Queer and Atheist, who said that getting started. But more than that, I really want us to understand that they may not be able to, and really, you know, be empathetic to that. I really appreciate Black non-believers, and I think that we should think about it in terms of if these people are coming out of the woodwork, if they're becoming involved in the movement, if Dave's pie chart can look more like a pie chart because there's a group that, you know, identifies with a very specific demographic, then I'm all for it, especially because they're not isolationists. It's not as if it's just, we're just going to only have Black people, and I've asked you and Ayanna, the founder of Black Atheists of America, what is the role of allies in your group? And this is probably the most important question that you'll have to answer. What is the role of allies, people that are not Black, non-believers, in your group, religionists or white people, or, you know, we really need to take time and really address that, because otherwise we're isolationists, otherwise we're cutting ourselves off from the group.
Well, I think there was two issues there. There's the issue of, you said that...
At least two.
Yeah, there's just two issues. There's the religious, the gay religious people, but there's also the gay atheists, but they're closeted in the atheists, and they're outwardly religious, and that's choosing to stay in one of the closets. And do you think that's a big proportion of the religious gay community?
I actually don't. If you get rid of the cognitive dissonance of there actually not being a God, then you don't have the self-loathing that would require you to play along. So I think that once they actually really do let go of God, then they probably don't, unless they're forced to by pretty large social constraints. I think it's pretty easy. But then they're just, you know, a boat without a paddle. Then a lot of them, they don't join other groups. They don't, you know, do anything else. I think they just either...
You don't think that both closets might be a bridge too far for some of them? They feel like maybe their family would reject them if they were gay and atheist, but they would still accept them if they were gay and still Christian?
Right.
Or atheist, I mean, as someone that's come out twice to my parents, when I told my dad, I'm actually the development director for American Atheists, so that's my full-time job. Atheism pays the bills. I told him that, and he went over to the neighbor's house and said I was trying to kill him. She's trying to kill me, y'all.
Which one was the first closet?
I told my parents that I was bi first,
Okay.
and then I told them that I was an atheist and that I was going to be involved, and that I felt it was very important, not only to, you know, my African American roots and my, you know, sexuality, but to my, you know, the fact that I'm a woman and the fact that, you know, like Blue Up and